you think about over the next 25 years, frontier markets are going to bring more people to the global labor force than the rest of the world combined.
Hey everyone, welcome to Expert Answers. Within the landscape of emerging market and developing economies, or EMDEs, there is a set of countries that sit between emerging markets and other developing economies. These are frontier market economies. More open to global financial markets than many other developing economies, they have enormous potential for growth and transformation, so they hold a special appeal for investors. But there is also greater exposure to risk and volatility. Why do frontier markets matter for development, investment, and global growth today? What challenges might be holding them back? And how could they break through? Let's find out. It's great to have Ayhan Kose back in Expert Answers. And today we're unpacking new research on frontier markets featured in the latest World Bank Group's Global Economic Prospects Report. So let's jump right in and start with a question that many might have, which is, what are frontier markets and what are some common characteristics they share?
So frontier markets are like in between. On the one hand, you have these emerging markets. They have quite a bit of market access. They are able to issue bonds. They have open capital accounts. And then on the other hand, you have these other developing economies. They are somewhat closed. Most of the time, their access to financial markets quite limited. They get concessional loans or grants. So the frontier markets are in between. They have a little bit of market access, not as much as these emerging markets. These are, of course, economies pretty much in every continent we operate. And when you think about their potential, in terms of the natural resources, in terms of the labor force, in terms of basically the human capital, the physical capital, sky's the limit.
Thinking about the jobs challenge and the potential that these economies have to address it, why are they so important?
So when we think about the global jobs challenge, frontier markets really are at the center of the challenge. 1.2 billion young people will join the global labor force. When you think about the big picture, 1.8 billion people, more than 1/5 of global population, live in frontier market economies. Over the next decade, 230 billion young people will join the labor force in frontier market economies. In advanced economies, population is slowing. In some emerging markets, population growth is slowing. Of course, in frontier market economies, still there is basically rapid population growth. And over a longer time period, if you think about over the next 25 years, frontier markets are going to bring more people to the global labor force than the rest of the world combined. So our ability to address the global jobs challenge is going to hinge on our ability to create jobs on the ground in these economies.
And now let me ask you some quick questions, starting with how many frontier market economies are there currently?
Nowadays we have 56. Back in 2012, there were only 39 frontier market economies.
And what are the top 3 policy priorities that they should focus on?
I think the number one policy priority when we think about the near-term challenges, creating a stable macroeconomic environment. The second one, investment is critical, especially investment in infrastructure, investment in the physical as well as human capital critical. And the third, given the high debt levels we see in these economies, managing debt, managing their fiscal positions, very, very important.
And have any of them graduated to the next level?
Yes, Panama, Bulgaria, Costa Rica, Romania, they all graduated to high income levels.
And now thinking about frontier markets economies as a whole, how have they performed over the last 25 years?
When you look at the big picture over the past 25 years, you would say, yes, they have been able to perform well. In fact, they have been able to deliver higher growth. The big issue is that when you look at what happened over time, growth has slowed down and slowed down very sharply. We look at, for example, investment per capita growth. Investment per capita growth relative to 2000s, nowadays half of what it used to be. So there is a serious growth challenge down the road, given the kind of the potential we see in these economies, given the need for jobs in these economies. In addition to that, when you look at, their ability to attract capital, they basically account for about 3.5% of global capital flows, and they account for, give and take, about 5% of global output. So they should have even much larger impact when we think about global financial flows, when we think about global GDP.
So then what lessons can we learn from those economies that have been performing well?
Yes, the report actually looks at the success stories, looks at, the best performing frontier market economies. There is no silver bullet. There is a, diversity of experiences when it comes to delivering better growth outcomes, better development outcomes. But there are some common threads. The first one, when you look at frontier market economies that deliver consistently strong growth, they have stable macroeconomic policies, monetary policy frameworks are well defined, fiscal frameworks are conducive to better manage debt and deficit. The second important, of course, the characteristics is investment in infrastructure, investment in human capital. A third important characteristics is their ability to manage greater financial integration. Most of the time what happens, countries open up their capital accounts, and then there are all types of, gyrations associated with coming capital inflows, and managing those gyrations critical. And finally, attracting foreign direct investment, having the kind of the institutional structure, business climate to support that, bringing foreign direct investment, but at the same time at home as well, mobilizing private investment.
And one last question before we wrap up. Are there any frontier market economies that stand out?
Yeah, when you think about these frontier market economies, there are good case studies, and we discussed these in the report. One of them in Rwanda, went through a very difficult period in the 90s that came out to internal war, undertook reforms, put together a strong services-based economy. And then you have the story of Vietnam, incredible per capita income gains in a very short time period at the back of very serious investment in human capital and becoming really a manufacturing powerhouse. So there are good stories for other frontier market economies to emulate, to think through. The bottom line is that when these economies get their act together, push growth-friendly reforms, ability to generate jobs, the sky is the limit for them.
Thank you so much, Ayhan, for unpacking this topic with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Expert Answers. Check out the link on the screen now to find out more about the most recent Global Economic Prospects Report. See you soon.